there's this awareness, there's this observer, there's this witness, just taking everything in, and whatever it is. I love that meditation. It made it so clear, because it was like, whatever it is that I think I am, I'm observing it, or there is something observing it. You know, I say I. So I'm not even sure what my question is. You know, you were talking about awakening, and in spirituality, there is this conversation about awakening as kind of an event, or there's kind of how you lived or experienced life before awakening, and how you experience life after awakening.
Right.
So I'm just curious about that. I mean, what's your experience with that? Is there, because it seems to me in this moment that I am awake or I'm not in the moment, and that's even not in my control. You know, I might, these thoughts, something is generating these thoughts, something's keeping all the cellular stuff going in my body, these complex operations. And it's not my conscious mind.
Yes. Well, in a way, you could say awakening is a lot of nonsense.
Uh-huh.
I mean, because the idea that it happens in an event in time,
Right,
is not really. I mean, this is the thing. Language and understanding based in language is the problem. It's language, but it's understanding, the assumption that language describes things. That's the problem. Language is utilitarian. In other words, you use it to do transactions and to do specific of things. That's all. And thought that is based in language is the same. It's like, for the sake of taking care of a little bit of business, but it isn't a real description of the way things are. And it's beyond language. It's, you could say it's the mind that is based in language, that tries to negotiate through life based in the way language is blown in the face of this. But in the same way that I'm saying that language is utilitarian, I'm using language and speaking to you about all of this. And so I'll speak in terms of levels, depending on where there's a bit of stuckness, or there's a lack of insight into the situation. And I speak that way with you, and I speak that way with myself. You know, and then again, I'm saying I and all of that, but that's, yeah. Did you want to say more?
Well, it seems like, well, I'll speak for myself or my history or whatever. You know, my interest, I think, in awakening was to resolve suffering. It seems like suffering is a result of mistaking thinking. What is it? It's like taking for real what isn't real, you know, like,
yes,
like my thoughts.
Yes.
I take that to be real rather than just going, oh, that's the thought I'm having.
Yes, but you see, and the idea of an I that takes it for real and not real is also
right.
A level of seeing. But it's true at it's appropriate and responsible that the sense of I should be as clean about the level that you're speaking about as possible. Like, oh, I'm taking this incorrectly. So to exercise that is important. That's discrimination. So for instance, like the sense of I, or you could say ourselves, to get clear about what we have control over and what we don't have control over. I mean, this is part of what I really love about Byron Katie. Like, is it your business or is it God's business? This is a very, very old thing in again, traditional Hinduism, and also in even in the West with the, you could say people like Socrates and Marcus Aurelius and these Greek philosophers who were more than head trippers. They were definitely had insight into the nature of existence. And their understanding of the universe was so similar to Buddhism and Hinduism. It's very, very, very non-dual. I'm panentheistic. So the development of like, okay, what do I really have control over? The I sense, what do you have control over? Mostly what you have control over is your reaction to things, your opinions about things. And so you see like, somebody walks into the room and lifts up their lip and kind of winces as they see you, and then they sit down. And now, to see that and then have a cascade of thoughts like, oh my God, this person doesn't like me. Who do they think they are? Blah, 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 blah. And it goes on and on and on. Now you could say, well, there's no I, so it doesn't matter. But the person that says there's no I, that doesn't matter, is also that I, right? So it is very helpful for that I to go, oh, what really did happen there? The person walked in, they lifted up their lip, they winced, and they sat down. All the rest was interpretation. All the rest I really don't know about. And all the rest kept me away from the present experience of the moment in my head and in my reactive body for about 15 minutes. And they got up and left after 7 minutes. So, it's that old Zen story, that Zen story where there's maybe a master and a junior monk walking in the forest, and there's a stream of water or like a river, and there's a beautiful girl, and she's at the river, and she doesn't want to get her dress wet, so she's not sure what to do. And the master picks up the girl and lifts her and walks across the river and puts her on the other side. And the junior monk's with the master, and he's aware that there's a rule, no touching women. And they're walking for a long time, for like a half an hour. And finally, the young monk says, Master, there's a rule that we're not supposed to be carrying women or touching women. You carried her. And the head monk said, I carried her for 30 seconds. You've been carrying her for the last half hour. It's that. It's like, okay, well, see, that awareness, moment by moment, of the way in which we keep ourselves from the present by our reactivity, and seeing clearly, like, what is within my control. Them wincing at me and lifting their lip isn't. In that moment, I might have said, hi, how are you? You look a little whatever, but I didn't. Instead, I went through this whole thing. So what can you take care of in the moment? That is really practical wisdom. That's practical mysticism. That keeps you, rather than saying, well, I have to be at a point where there's no I, there was no I anyway, blah, 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 blah. And then your body mind is living in reactivity continuously. Now, what's wrong with living in reactivity? Nothing's wrong with it, but it will make it much more difficult. So this is what's wrong with it. Much more difficult to be in the moment and actually see there's no I. So traditionally, again, I'm talking traditionally, not the way it's done in the West much. You worked on that level first for a long time before they even talked to you about the fact there was no I. So you had developed a spiritual I, and what I meant by a spiritual I is an I that was continuously not producing suffering, not producing judgment, not producing any of that, but was just being in the moment. And then a master would say, after a long time of that, and seeing you're established here as an I, going, yes, I'm very pure and I'm keeping this. And then they say, well, who's pure? Look. Then you were like, oh, no I. And guess what? There was no motions of attention pulling you back into it because you've been taking care of that. But you see, what we're in the 21st century, and believe me, I couldn't have done that because it takes a bit of trust. In other words, you have to trust the tradition that first you do this thing, and you be good, you be vigilant with your mind to be in the present moment for the sake of whatever, and then no I and full expansion. Now people just get pointed to no I, full expansion first. And I couldn't do it any other way. I thank God for Papaji, who required nothing, just pointed. Whoa, I am this, and you instant expansion. But then what they call vasanas, or governing sentimentalities, or kind of systems of thought and conditioning of the body-mind organism, pull me right out again, and then I have to do self-inquiry, come out again, back and forth, until actually at this point I realized, oh wow, ground zero, like, oh yeah, like non-judgment, that kind of like, it's not my business, let me bring my attention to the moment. That undoes so much of the conditioning. I'm not, I'm not saying that one is better than the, I actually feel like in the 21st century, most of us are going to have the mind-blowing expansion inside of direct pointing first. But it's good to become aware that, it's useful. When you have a sense of I, especially if you've spent a lot of time relinquishing the sense of I, to now go to the level of the sense of I and say, well, what do I have control over really in this situation? And if I don't have any control over it, why am I wasting my time thinking about it? Just being very, very logical and reasonable. And the Greeks were really good at this. And actually, the Buddhists and the Hindus are good at it too if you start from A and go B, C, D. But, I didn't do that. I had to have the mind-blowing experience first. I had to know why I'm doing it, really, for myself. I didn't have the requisite faith in the tradition that was so matter of fact in the past. And that's great. I mean, this is where we are now. This is the 21st century. So just to bring it to mind. So there, I don't know, that might have been a tangent too far there on Dan.
No, I mean, there's a couple more questions. I don't want to dominate the whole thing, but...
Well, there's only, let's see, we all can dominate today. So.
Okay. Well, I'll just throw these out, and then if there's other...
Well, let me just say one more thing. The sense of yourself as an individual I, the functionality of it, the cleaning up of it, the simplifying of it can happen much more powerfully once there's a sense of that which transcends the sense of I. But my own feeling is that it's very, very helpful to us to think in terms, and it's again, us, I, thinking in terms of being vigilant at that level for our own sake, because of the relief of suffering that you were speaking about. The original reason that we get into this to begin with is to relieve the suffering. What ends up happening for a lot of us is that awakening becomes almost like a drug. And many of us got involved with awakening because of a mind expanding experience under illicit substances or different kinds of medicines. And then it becomes like, wow, I need to be in that state or I'm not doing it right. Whereas when you're not in that state, when the controller of the universe has you in a different state, then the appropriate thing is to be vigilant in terms of what is actually in front of you, including the I. And in the midst of that, it often dissolves.
So, and I actually wanted to throw something in there about even that level of vigilance, even that, this is the sense here, that even that isn't in our control. Like there's a point. So just wanted to throw that in there.
And that's right. And that's, again, when we get to levels.
Right.
Exactly. Even that's not in our control. I mean, you know, so there you go again. So there you can be devotion when you recognize, oh, I didn't even have that. Ultimately, nothing is in our control. The thing is that the sense of I has implicit with it some sense of control. You could say it like this. The sense of control is not in our control. So there's times when or you could say, well, yes, sometimes we do have control, but whether we have control or not is not in our control. Ultimately, right? The thing is when you do have a sense of like, oh, there, I could see that, now I cut it off, then you do. If you go, I can see it, but I can't do anything about it, then you surrender to that as well. And there's no resistance to that. But even that is always in the hands of grace. So yeah, there we go.